Hello, this is Dan Arth, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the New York Times January 14th, 2026 issue on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Iran prepares to execute a protester as Trump threatens strong action. Article by Abdi Latif Daher and Sanam Mahouzi. Rights groups and relatives said Iran planned to put an anti-government protester to death for the first time during the latest wave of unrest in the country. Iran was expected to execute a protester on Wednesday for the first time during the current wave of anti-government unrest. President Trump has threatened, quote, strong action if Iran carries out any such death sentences. Rights groups and relatives identified the protester as Irfan Sultani, 26, from an area west of the capital, Tehran. He was arrested on January 8th and has been denied access to a lawyer or other means to mount a defense, according to the Norway-based Hengau Organization for Human Rights. A statement by the rights group said his family was also kept unaware of the judicial proceedings and was allowed only a brief final visit before the scheduled execution on Wednesday. On Tuesday, his family said he had never used violence and only sought basic freedoms for Iranians. Since December 28th, Iran has been rocked by the largest protests in years against its authoritarian rulers, prompting Mr. Trump to say he would respond strongly. Mr. Trump has made a series of comments pledging support for the protesters and threatening strikes on Iran if its forces kill protesters. Late on Tuesday, as reports spread of an imminent execution of an Iranian protester, Mr. Trump warned of consequences if it went ahead. "We will take very strong action if they do such a thing," he said in an interview with CBS Evening News. Earlier on Tuesday, Mr. Trump urged Iranians to keep protesting. The U.S. military is also evacuating an unspecified number of non-essential personnel from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar as a precautionary measure, according to two U.S. military officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss operational matters. The movement was initially fueled by anger over the economy, which has been battered by years of corruption, government mismanagement, and Western sanctions. It quickly evolved into a broader anti-government uprising against the clerical establishment that has ruled Iran since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. As many as 3,000 people, mostly protesters, have been killed in the unrest, according to a senior Iranian health official, and witnesses have described government forces firing on unarmed protesters. The toll also includes members of the security forces, he said. The flow of information about the protests has been severely restricted by an internet blackout that has lasted nearly a week, most likely obscuring the true scale and toll of the unrest. After the protests began last month, Iranian officials initially struck a conciliatory tone, saying they were open to dialogue with demonstrators. But as the protests spread, they hardened their stance, shut down the internet, and cracked down with lethal force. Officials labeled protesters saboteurs and vandals who were aiming to appease Mr. Trump. They warned that those involved in clashes would face severe punishments, including death by hanging. Iran has a history of executing protesters, including demonstrations in 2022. The practice has drawn condemnation from the public and human rights organizations. According to the Washington group Human Rights Activists in Iran, Close to 100 forced confessions have been broadcast on state television since the protests began. The footage, often accompanied by dramatic music, shows detainees with their faces blurred, interspersed with clips purporting to show protesters attacking security forces. Those elements who beheaded people in the streets or burned people alive must be tried and punished as quickly as possible, Iran's Chief Justice Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei said on Wednesday in a video recording shared by the semi-official news agency Tasnim. Next article from the New York Times. Why Greenland Matters for a Warming World by Somini Sen-Gupta. What happens in Greenland does not stay in Greenland. Turns out the fate of the world's largest island has outsized importance for billions of people on the planet. That's because of the one thing that Greenland is quickly losing: ice. Most of Greenland's landmass, which takes up about 2 million square kilometers in all, or nearly 840,000 square miles, is covered in ice. That ice is melting rapidly because the polar regions of the world are warming rapidly, with wide-ranging consequences for the stability of the Earth's climate. Blame the burning of coal, oil, and gas. Their emissions have driven up global temperatures, most strikingly in the Arctic, which is warming at least twice as fast as the rest of the planet. As the Arctic warms, potential new trading routes open up, as well as access to mineral riches, including those that are vital for clean energy technologies useful for slowing climate change. In short, climate change makes the Arctic more accessible and more of a strategic target for the world powers, a fact not lost on President Trump. His fixation on Greenland is an admission that climate change is real, said John Conger, a former Pentagon official in the Obama administration, who is now an advisor to the Center for Climate and Security, a research institute. Trump administration officials who have made repeated threats to seize the territory are due to meet with officials from Greenland and Denmark on Wednesday. Here are 3 things related to the global climate to keep in mind: ice and its consequences. In the 12 months ending on August 31st, 2025, Greenland lost 105 billion metric tons of ice, according to scientists at the Danish Meteorological Institute, who published their findings in Carbon Brief, an online publication. That was no anomaly. Greenland's ice sheet has been thinning for the past 29 years. It shrank by nearly 2,000 square miles from 1985 to 2022, according to a study published in Nature. Melting ice means more fresh water in the ocean, which raises sea levels, which can be dangerous for coastal regions all over the world. The global sea level has gone up by about 4 inches since 1993. If all the ice of Greenland were to melt, albeit an impossible proposition during the century, that could result in 23 feet of sea level rise, or 7.4 meters. Scientists say rising sea levels makes flooding worse during storms and high tides. Greenland is sort of in an unstoppable trajectory to melt, said Sarah Das, a glaciologist who is a scientist emeritus at the Woods Hole Oceanography Institution. The loss of sea ice has another effect. As it melts, it reduces the total bright surface area that can reflect sunlight back to the atmosphere. More of the sun's heat is absorbed by the ocean, and in turn, the ocean warms even more. Then there's the effect on ocean circulation patterns. Recent research suggests that the melting Greenland ice sheet is helping to slow a network of ocean currents, with the potential to affect weather patterns even in the southern hemisphere. Greenland's riches. Greenland, a semi autonomous territory of Denmark, sits on an array of minerals including graphite, zinc, and rare earths. Many of those are important to European nations as they try to expand their adoption of renewable energy technologies. A majority of what the 27 country bloc has identified as critical raw materials can be found in Greenland. Graphite is critical for batteries, for instance, and China dominates the global graphite market. Some of President Trump's allies have invested in mining interests in and around Greenland. Extracting these minerals is no easy task because of all that ice. Also, the government of Greenland has banned uranium mining, citing the risk of environmental damage. Then there's oil. Oil companies have tried for 50 years to extract oil in the ecologically sensitive Arctic waters off the coast of Greenland. The government in 2021 said it would stop granting oil exploration licenses, citing climate considerations, environmental considerations, and economic common sense. New shipping lanes. The warming Arctic is already causing trouble for Greenlanders. Harbors tend to become shallow as ice melts, and melting permafrost can damage roads. But climate change is also opening up a new shipping route along the Northern Sea. China is keen to exploit that route as it would shorten trade to Europe significantly. Beijing calls it Polar Silk Road, a shipping corridor that passes through Russia's northern coast and is open only a few months of the year. Environmentalists warn of grave ecological risks from increased shipping, including from the black carbon that's produced by the heavy fuel oil that powers ships. The prospect of a new and faster shipping route has spurred a race to build icebreakers. Russia has the largest fleet, followed by a number of NATO members, including Canada, Finland, and Sweden. Mr. Conger, the former Pentagon official, said that made it all the more worthwhile for Washington to strengthen its ties with NATO rather than pick a fight over Greenland with a NATO ally like Denmark. The United States gains strength from being a part of NATO, Mr. Conger said. It has allies with capability. Article by Eric Schmidt. U.S. moves some personnel from key airbase as tensions mount with Iran. The U.S. military is evacuating an unspecified number of non-essential personnel from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar as a precautionary measure while President Trump weighs ordering military action over the protests in Iran. The Pentagon began moving some personnel out of the sprawling airbase because of the rising tension between the United States and Iran over the Tehran government's crackdown against protesters there, according to two U.S. military officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss operational matters. The Qatari government said in a statement that the evacuations are being undertaken in response to the current regional tensions. The Pentagon Central Command declined to comment. In a social media post on Tuesday, President Trump told Iranians demonstrating against their government that help is on its way, a signal he may soon intervene. If Mr. Trump orders military strikes against Iran, his options are somewhat limited. Last fall, the Pentagon sent the carrier Gerald R. Ford and other escort warships from the eastern Mediterranean to the Caribbean. Even so, the Navy has 3 missile-firing destroyers in the Middle East region now, including the Roosevelt, which in recent days has steamed into the Red Sea, military officials said on Wednesday. The Navy also has at least 1 missile-firing submarine in the region, Pentagon officials said. The Pentagon has presented a wide range of options to Mr. Trump. Possible targets for a strike include Iran's nuclear program, going beyond the U.S. airstrikes that battered it in June, and ballistic missile sites, U.S. officials have said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. But other options, such as a cyber attack or a strike against Iran's domestic security apparatus, which is using lethal force against protesters, were more likely, the officials have said. Any attack is at least several days away and could prompt a vigorous retaliation from Iran, officials said. After the United States' attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites last June, Iran retaliated by firing missiles at Al Udeid, the biggest U.S. base in the Middle East. The base serves as the regional headquarters for the U.S. Central Command, and about 10,000 troops are stationed there. U.S. intelligence has assessed that if the United States were to conduct a military strike against Iran, Tehran would retaliate by again attacking military bases in the region, according to U.S. officials briefed on the intelligence. That assessment was discussed at the White House on Tuesday evening. According to an official briefed on the discussion, American spy agencies believe that in addition to the base in Qatar, Iran could possibly strike at U.S. forces stationed at bases in Syria and Iraq, one of those officials said. The intelligence assessment is of little surprise. Iranian officials have publicly said they would retaliate against any America strike conducted in support of the protesters. The President of the United States, who repeatedly speaks about the unsuccessful attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, would do better to also mention the Iranian missiles that crushed the U.S. Al Udeid base. Ali Shabkhani, a senior Iranian official and advisor to Iran's supreme leader, said in a social media post on Wednesday. This would certainly help create a more realistic understanding of Iran's will and capability to respond to any aggression. American officials have said that the Iranian protests are the most significant since the 1979 revolution and a threat to the government. But it is not clear which side, the government or the protesters, has the upper hand, officials said. Iranian officials have been trying to obscure the exact death toll, but American estimates, once set conservatively below 1,000 deaths, have been rising. The U.S. military has used Al Udeid Air Base since the days after the September 11th attacks, when it positioned planes there to target the Taliban and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. 2 years later, Al Udeid became the main U.S. air operations hub in the region and is heavily fortified by an array of air defenses. U.S. commanders used the base to coordinate missions during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as strikes against the Islamic State in Syria. The Air Force has deployed a variety of aircraft there, from advanced fighters and long-range bombers to drones, transport planes, and in-flight refueling tankers. Article by Julie Bossman, How ICE Crackdowns Set Off a Resistance in American Cities. It began in Los Angeles, in signal chats and strategy sessions on Zoom. Last year, as immigration raids proliferated throughout the city, Latino activists and neighbors began organizing a response, monitoring for immigration and customs enforcement agents along sidewalks and in Home Depot parking lots, and texting their networks when they spotted an arrest underway. By late summer, activists in Chicago were trained and ready. Before the Trump administration had announced a crackdown called Operation Midway Blitz, immigrant rights organizations had handed out orange whistles for volunteers to use as a public warning system, formed rapid response groups, and advised people to report sightings of ICE agents and memorize their own legal rights. Chicagoans, even many without formal ties to protest groups, showed defiance against ICE with hands-off Chicago signs adorned with the city's beloved starred and striped flag, placed prominently in windows of restaurants and bungalows. And in recent weeks in Minneapolis, the latest focus for a Trump administration surge of immigration enforcement, a loose but growing network of neighborhood volunteers has shown up near reported arrests, yelling at agents and recording them on iPhone cameras. Some gathered near hotels where agents were believed to be staying, pounding drums and making noise. President Trump's sweeping effort to tamp down illegal immigration using masked federal agents who film their interactions with cell phones and often question American citizens about their legal status has set off a surge in confrontational activism fueled by both large liberal advocacy groups and hyper-local neighborhood networks. In Los Angeles, Chicago, and Minneapolis, established groups representing labor and immigrant rights have provided funding and organized downtown rallies against the Trump administration. But fierce opposition to ICE and the Border Patrol has also sprung up through block clubs, neighborhood group chats, school Facebook groups, and Catholic parishes stretching beyond the typical Democratic voter base. Participants say they have been propelled into action with two goals in mind: an urge to protect their neighbors, many of whom are in the country without authorization but have no criminal backgrounds, and also to push back against what they see as a violent and overreaching federal government. It's a lot of people who wouldn't normally involve themselves in politics, but at the same time don't like what's happening in their community, said Sandra Trevino, a Chicago resident who works in sales but spends her weekends patrolling the city for immigration agents and texting her networks with updates. Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, has called the actions of such activists dangerous, part of a coordinated campaign of violence against law enforcement. In Minnesota, where an ICE agent fatally shot a 37-year-old woman, Renee Nicole Good, last week, tensions have mounted since an immigration crackdown began there in early December. Some Minnesota residents have thrown icy snowballs or other objects at agents, called them Nazis and fascists, and trailed them in their cars, honking their horns, a practice frequently used in Chicago last year. Secretary Noem has been clear. Anyone who obstructs or assaults law enforcement will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, the department said in a statement on Tuesday. Federal investigators are looking into Ms. Good's possible connections to activist groups, and Mr. Trump has described Ms. Good and her wife, Becca Good, as being, quote, professional agitators, though he offered no evidence to support his claims. It is not yet clear how deeply the Goods were connected to anti-ICE efforts in Minneapolis. Becca Good was wearing an orange whistle around her neck as she confronted federal agents while filming them with her cell phone. Videos show moments before Renee Good was fatally shot in her car. In a statement issued to Minnesota Public Radio, Becca Good suggested that the two women had taken part in a protest on the day of the shooting, but their involvement beyond that day is unknown. On Wednesday, January 7th, we stopped to support our neighbors, Becca Good said. We had whistles. They had guns. Anti-ICE tactics by volunteers and so-called patrollers who track and follow immigration agents and caravans have only intensified in the Twin Cities in the last week, despite Ms. Good's death, activists and officials said in interviews. Some people wondered if Ms. Good's death would lead to a broader reckoning by organizers about the risks of confronting ICE agents and the safety of pursuing them in cars, but group chats on WhatsApp have proliferated as neighbors watched for signs of immigration agents and rushed outside to confront them. Ashley Lopez, who works in education and lives in the city of West St. Paul, has become active in anti-ICE neighborhood groups only in the weeks since Miss Good's death. Because of what happened to Renee, I felt like we had nothing to lose anymore, said Miss Lopez, who has joined patrols that blow whistles and set off their own car alarms if they see ICE agents. Why should she be the only one who put herself in danger? Tensions between federal agents and Minnesotans are intensifying on sidewalks and parking lots and on the streets. Some activists said they have also observed increasingly forceful responses by ICE and Border Patrol agents since Miss Good's death, with agents chasing patrollers through parking lots and spraying their vehicles with chemical agents. Dai Do, an immigrant rights activist, said that before the immigration crackdown in Minneapolis, her organization received dozens of emails a day from people asking how they could get involved. That has now grown to hundreds daily. People are still showing up and defending their community despite seeing such a violent act, she said. They're calling for justice, even though there is a chance they could be hurt in the process. Patrollers in Chicago said this week that they were still roaming around the city looking for ICE agents, but many of their Signal chats and Facebook groups have gone quiet, a sign that the Trump administration's focus has shifted squarely to Minneapolis, at least for now. That feels far different from how it did in Chicago last fall, when masked federal agents walked down the Magnificent Mile downtown, startling residents and tourists. As residents began protesting their presence in neighborhoods, agents used aggressive methods to disperse crowds, releasing tear gas and pepper spray along blocks around the city. In a way, it really galvanized local support against them everywhere they went, said Brandon Lee, a coordinator for the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. When they release tear gas in a neighborhood, it doesn't matter if you support ICE or not, you're going to get tear gassed. Organizers in Chicago said that during Operation Midway Blitz, they had been able to hone practices borrowed from Los Angeles activists as hundreds of Border Patrol and ICE agents made arrests around the Chicago region. The Border Patrol and Trump administration used Chicago as a testing ground, and we in turn used them as a testing ground right back for certain organizing tactics, said Joanna Klonsky, a media strategist in Chicago. That included rapid response networks, the tactic of following ICE and CBP vehicles with whistles, and being as loud as possible to warn people nearby. We're now at a point where there is a playbook for peaceful legal opposition, Ms. Klonsky said. Organizers in Los Angeles and Chicago said they were watching Minneapolis closely and anticipating where Mr. Trump would plan his next surge of immigration agents. Groups in New York City have passed out thousands of whistles so far, bracing for a high-profile surge of immigration enforcement. Folks are realizing that the only way to respond is quickly and in person, said Alida Garcia, a political consultant who has been organizing in Los Angeles. What is interesting about this moment is if it's your employee you're protecting, or your kid's teacher that you're protecting, or the street vendor you buy tacos from once a month, that feels very personal. Article by Dory Shevlin and Rhonda Kaysen. LA Rams owner Stan Kroenke becomes largest private land owner in the U.S. Stan Kroenke, the rancher and billionaire owner of the Los Angeles Rams, Denver Nuggets, and other major sports teams, is now the largest private landowner in the United States, according to the Land Report, which tracks private land holdings. In December, the billionaire purchased 937,000 acres of non-contiguous land in New Mexico, according to the Land Report, making it the largest single land purchase in the U.S. since 2011 and nudging his total holdings to more than 2.7 million acres dotted across the American West and Canada. Mr. Kroenke owns roughly 60 million square feet of commercial space, including huge sports venues in Inglewood, California, and Denver. He also owns the teams that play there: the Los Angeles Rams, Colorado Avalanche, Denver Nuggets, and Colorado Mammoth, as well as the Colorado Rapids and Arsenal's men's and women's soccer teams in Britain. His wife, Ann Walton Kroenke, is an heiress to the Walmart fortune. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Mr. Kroenke's new ranch land was previously owned by the heirs of Henry Singleton, founder of the tech company Teledyne. Neither the seller's brokers nor the buyer's brokers disclosed details of the transaction. The land report had been tracking Singleton's ranches for several years and confirmed the sale via public databases in 4 of the counties the property spans. Mr. Kroenke's representatives did not respond to a request for comment. Before the purchase of Singleton Ranches, Mr. Kroenke made headlines in 2016 with his purchase of Texas's 535,000-acre Wagoner Ranch, which hadn't changed ownership since its founding in 1849 and is the largest contiguous ranch in the state of Texas. Mr. Kroenke's other high-profile purchases included the 124,000-acre Broken O Ranch in Montana in 2012 and the Wine Cup Gamble Ranch in Nevada, which he bought from the former Reebok chairman Paul Fireman in 2019. Capital is moving into American land for a variety of reasons, said Eric O'Keefe, editor of the Land Report. Among them, it's a proven return on investment in terms of the slow, steady appreciation. The publication released its list of top 100 private landowners for 2026 at the annual Land Investment Expo in Des Moines, Iowa. Land has always been an appealing investment to the ultra-rich, but recent years have seen billionaires gobbling up ever larger quantities of it. According to the Land Report, the average quantity held by the top 100 landowners 10 years ago was 378,000 acres. Today, it is 430,000 acres. The entire land mass of Delaware is 1.2 million acres. Mr. Kroenke's holdings are over twice that size. Article by Matt Stevens. Kiefer Sutherland is arrested after assaulting ride-share driver, police say. The actor Kiefer Sutherland was arrested and booked into jail in Los Angeles on Monday after an encounter in which the police said he assaulted the driver of a ride-share vehicle and made, quote, criminal threats toward that person. Mr. Sutherland, best known for playing Jack Bauer in the television drama 24, was released from custody after posting a $50,000 bond, according to county jail records available online. He has a court date scheduled for February 2nd, the records say. A representative for Mr. Sutherland did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Tuesday. In a statement, a spokesman for the Los Angeles Police Department said officers had responded to a call at about 12:15 a.m. on Monday about an assault involving a ride-share driver near the corner of Sunset Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue in the Hollywood area. The investigation determined that Mr. Sutherland had entered a ride-share vehicle, physically assaulted the driver, and made criminal threats toward the driver. The police statement says officers arrested Mr. Sutherland at the scene. The police said the driver had not sustained any injuries requiring medical treatment. Article by Nicholas Fandos and David Iaffe Bellany. Eric Adams hawked a crypto coin. A day later, $1 million was missing. Eric Adams was crowing as he stood in Times Square on Monday to launch his first post-mayoral venture, a New York City themed crypto coin that he said would fund the fight against anti Semitism. This thing is about to take off like crazy, he boasted in an accompanying hype video. That somehow turned out to be an understatement. In the minutes after trading opened, the coin NYC token rocketed to a market capitalization of nearly $600 million, then crashed almost as quickly after an account linked to the coin's launch withdrew about 2.5 million in early proceeds without notice, unnerving investors. By Tuesday morning, the account had returned some of the funds, but Mr. Adams was battling accusations from crypto enthusiasts that his NYC token might be a so-called rug pull, a common crypto scheme in which someone markets a coin to the public and then quickly siphons off significant profits. The project's leaders insisted no money had been stolen. Still, Mr. Adams called in Brock Pierce, a crypto investor and friend, to try to help salvage matters, according to Mr. Pierce. This was not how Mr. Adams had hoped to begin his business career, especially after ethics scandals and his own federal criminal indictment cut his mayoralty off after a single term. Mr. Adams did not comment on the whipsaw events. An X account associated with the coin tried to calm potential investors, insisting in a cryptic statement that the withdrawal was merely undertaken to, quote, rebalance the liquidity of the coin to adjust for demand, and that the coin was in it for the long haul. In an interview, Mr. Pierce offered a harsh assessment of the rollout. The people Mr. Adams was working with did not have any of the necessary experience, he said, and the launch had gone sideways, justifiably alarming a community of crypto enthusiasts who have frequently been bilked before. He said it would be clear within 72 hours or so if the coin would survive, but he added that it might take Mr. Adams longer to regain the esteem of the crypto community, even as he argued that the former mayor was innocent. He's going to have to do some work to restore that credibility, he said. In the crypto world, anyone can launch a new coin and market it to the public for purchase at low cost and without much technological expertise. Cryptocurrencies like NYC token occupy a legal gray area in the United States. Under the Biden administration, federal prosecutors and securities regulators aggressively pursued crypto-related crime, but President Trump has largely unwound that enforcement effort. Early last year, the Securities and Exchange Commission declared that meme coins, a type of cryptocurrency based on an online joke or tied to a celebrity mascot, would not be subject to regulatory oversight. When politicians and celebrities start selling digital coins, though, it rarely ends well. By starting his own coin, Mr. Adams was following the footsteps of Mr. Trump, who launched a digital currency called $Trump shortly before his inauguration last year. The price of $Trump briefly surged before dipping, leading to losses for hundreds of thousands of investors. Still, it was a profitable play for the Trump family and its business partners, who accumulated nearly $100 million in transaction fees within weeks of the coin's launch. Last year, Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, announced the creation of a cryptocurrency called $Libra, designed to somehow boost the country's economy. The coin's price surged, then swiftly collapsed, leaving investors with $250 million in losses. The crash led to accusations that insiders had fled with the profits and sparked a political scandal in Argentina. The launch of new NYC token has begun to follow a similar pattern. A longtime crypto enthusiast, Mr. Adams unveiled the coin on Monday, describing it as a way to raise funds to combat anti Semitism and what he called anti Americanism, as well as to teach young people about blockchain technology. This is going to be how we address many of the issues facing not only this city, but many cities in America, he said. Mr. Adams, who left office on January 1, told reporters that he did not plan to take payment from the venture, at least at first. Other details were harder to pin down, including whom the former mayor was working with and what nonprofit groups he planned to support. Todd Shapiro, a longtime friend, helped arrange news coverage, and Frank Carone, his former chief of staff, has been involved in helping Mr. Adams set up several lines of business. But neither Mr. Adams nor Mr. Shapiro would say who was working directly on the cryptocurrency project with the former mayor. The coin's launch was sloppy from the start. It was available to trade about 20 minutes before instructions for buying it were unveiled on X, according to Nicholas Vayman, the chief executive of Bubble Maps, a crypto analytics firm. A gap that long can open the door to insider trading, Mr. Vayman said, because it gives anyone with advanced knowledge an opportunity to buy the coin before the public announcement pushes up its price. More suspicious activity soon emerged. Every crypto transaction is recorded publicly, allowing analysts to track the funds that were abruptly withdrawn. Some 1.5 million of the funds were later returned, but by Tuesday afternoon, about 1 million in investors' money was still not accounted for, according to Mr. Vayman. This is definitely a red flag, he said. Exactly why the withdrawal happened wasn't clear, even as some crypto enthusiasts accused the former mayor of fleecing the coin's investors. Maybe it's lack of coordination, Mr. Vayman said. Maybe it's incompetence. Mr. Shapiro's office shared an unsigned statement from NYC Token saying that its market maker made adjustments in an attempt to keep trading running smoothly, and as part of this process, moved liquidity. The team has not withdrawn any money from the account, the group said in a statement, but it did not elaborate. Mr. Pierce said that he had conducted his own after-action review and believed that Mr. Adams had good intentions. He asserted that no one has stolen or run off with any money. Some former aides and allies to Mr. Adams, though, were not waiting around to draw conclusions. Like most other stories about Adams, it'll be metabolized by the public as a big joke. Jonah Alon, who worked as Mr. Adams' press secretary when he's Brooklyn Borough president and mayor, wrote in a pair of posts on X. But he added, for the people who served under him, still desperately trying to line up new jobs, most of them dedicated civil servants, not cronies or apparatchiks, there's nothing funny about it. Hours later, another social media post involving Mr. Adams began to circulate, capturing an exchange he had with an airline passenger. The video post shows the former mayor warning the passenger as they disembarked from a flight that he was no longer mayor and seemed to issue a threat. "You're going to see the Brooklyn in me," he said. Article by Jason Zinoman. Did the worst Netflix special of the year win the Golden Globe? Awards are silly, harmless, fun. Unless someone gives one to me, then they are solemn business deserving of respect. That's been my position more or less. I like to watch the hosts of the Tonys or the Oscars make jokes and enjoy an actorly speech as much as anyone. But I don't expend much energy getting upset at injustices in, say, the Best Supporting Actor category. But on Sunday, when the Golden Globe for Best Stand-Up Comedy on Television went to Ricky Gervais for the second time in 3 years, the win shook me out of my indifference. That has dismal, meandering laundry list of jokes was even nominated. That his dismal, meandering laundry list of jokes was even nominated was absurd. That it won, perverse. Imagine if Steven Seagal received the Oscar for Best Actor twice, or if The Alto Knights won for Best Picture. Taste is subjective, of course, but how can anyone who watched more than a dozen stand-up specials this year think that Ricky Gervais's pretentiously titled Mortality set the standard? Maybe the fact that he hosted the Globes 5 times earned him goodwill. Amy Poehler, another former host, won the first Globe for podcasting on Sunday, and yet this celebration of one of the worst Netflix specials of the year sends a different message about the lack of respect afforded stand-up. Out of thousands of hours sweated over by comedians, the one that receives the Globe includes a joke that bombed so badly, Gervais himself says, needs a bit of work on that one. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I'm a huge admirer of his version of The Office, and while he has never been an elite stand-up, he has made me laugh. But in Mortality, Gervais is mailing it in, getting some of his biggest laughs with lines delivered years ago at the Golden Globes. Is that what persuaded the organization's voters? It couldn't have been when he tells the audience to expect his most honest and confessional show so far, then proceeds to say nothing we don't already know. The real purpose of this comment is to set up a dull joke about Edinburgh Festival fringe shows wallowing in victimhood that has been done better countless times. Then again, no one plays the victim with more persistence than Gervais. They've tried to cancel me for 15 years, he says in the special. Who has? Not Netflix, which pumps out his specials every couple of years. Maybe the Golden Globes? No, he says. Not a single punchline he wrote for them was cut. He can't even commit to his own nonsense. The intent behind this lazy writing is vague, but it seems that Gervais is aiming for a special that's not just funny, but also important. Again, notice the title. But he has nothing new to say. He speaks soberly of the danger of people who get their feelings hurt over jokes and casts himself as leader of the cultural pushback. We won, he announces before immediately warning viewers to stay vigilant against the mysterious they who, he claims, are licking their wounds and will be back with something matter. He is hardly the only one to do this, but most of his compatriots fighting so-called cancel culture have moved on. A few, like Dave Chappelle, still lean on the subject but have other tricks. Gervais beats this one drum over and over again, incapable of seeing anything in the world today that might threaten free speech beyond people upset at his jokes. No news will shake him of this view. The most revealing joke in Mortality involves what sounds like an ideal meal. He's sitting down in a restaurant with no one to bother him. Perfection. Suddenly, a busboy shows up and, get ready for the punchline, sniffles. This is the whole joke. Don't you hate it when a busboy gets a cold? What rich misanthrope can't relate? Being around a sniffle isn't the worst part, though. No, it's not being able to say anything about the sniffle because of censorious etiquette. Look, it's possible to create a funny joke about being in a room with someone sniffling, and I don't believe in ironclad rules about punching up or down, but there isn't much of an effort here. There's no cleverness to this bit or expected twist, just smug anger and dopey cruelty. Why does this matter? Bad or boring art gets rewarded with prizes all the time, and no one takes the Golden Globes seriously, right? Part of the issue is that in a culture that pays so much attention to award shows, stand-up comedy doesn't have its own, and the awards that do celebrate specials pit comics against other entertainers, the Emmys, or focus on albums, the Grammys. The prize for stand-up is one of the few trophies that the Golden Globes give out that doesn't have a more prestigious analog. If you are a casual fan using awards as a guide to the best in the field, you might think that Gervais is on a historic run, and that his oblivious rich guy observational humor is what passes for excellence. This is not good advertisement for the art form. To judge by the comics nominated this year, Brett Goldstein, Kevin Hart, Bill Maher, Kumail Nanjiani, Sarah Silverman. The Globes are more interested in fame, not humor. Goldstein is best known as an actor. Maher is a late night host. Hart is a multi hyphenate mogul. This doesn't mean they aren't funny, but there seems to be a different standard here. There's no stand up equivalent of the Artie, it was just an accident getting nominated. And compared with the major acting categories, it's much more likely that the comedy nominees are moonlighting as stand up. There's so many funny people who do this as their day job. They would benefit from exposure on CBS, which broadcast the Globes. So would audiences. You got the sense that the annoyed irreverence with which Wanda Sykes introduced the nominees of this category was itself a statement. If there are going to be awards for comedy, those who dole them out should try a little harder. Article by Vanessa Friedman and Jacob Bernstein. What does the Saks bankruptcy mean for shoppers? On Wednesday, Saks Global, the parent company of Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, and Bergdorf Goodman, and the largest luxury department store group in America, filed for bankruptcy protection. Though it had been expected for a few months, the news still sent shock waves through the fashion industry. Here's what it could mean for you. Is this the end of Saks and Neiman Marcus? No. Saks Global has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, not Chapter 7, which means it has too much debt to effectively run its business and is reorganizing under new owners, but it is not yet liquidating. This is not Barney's situation, at least not yet. But it may mean the end of the Saks and Neiman Marcus near you. Retailers often use bankruptcy to get out of expensive leases, and the new owners of the group are expected to close a number of Saks and Neiman stores, as well as about half of the Saks off Fifth stores. That usually doesn't begin until about 30 days after the filing. And it may mean the end of some small designers that sell their clothes directly to department stores like Neiman and Saks and rely on it for the bulk of their revenue. Whose fault is this? First, people blamed Mark Metrick, the Saks chief executive, who resigned earlier this month, for being too high-handed in his relationships with vendors. Now they are blaming Richard Baker, the man behind the creation of Saks Global. See, when Saks acquired Neiman Marcus in late 2024, it took on lots of debt. Then management changed the payment terms for brands that supplied the stores, which meant that the brand started sending fewer products, which meant there was less to sell, which meant there was less money coming in. The biggest problem, however, may have been the fact that the whole retail business changed thanks to digital, social media, and direct-to-consumer shopping, and department stores didn't change with it. Add in global uncertainty, which makes people less excited about spending lots of money, and you have a very bad situation. Yes, if anyone checked out the social media, hang on. If they are closing stores, does that mean there will be giant going out of business sales? Yes. If anyone checked out the social media posts about the up to 85% off sale at Saks Off Fifth on 57th Street in December, you'll have an idea of what you can expect if those stores close, though when that will happen is up in the air. Will I still be able to find my favorite designers at the Saks stores that are left? Again, it depends. The bankruptcy should not affect big luxury brands like Prada, Dior, and Gucci, which generally operate concessions in department stores, meaning that they rent their space from the store but manage and own their own products. In fact, in a recent report by the research firm Bernstein Luca Solca, a luxury analyst said he expected that most luxury brands were aiming to reach the point where 95% of their sales were direct to consumer and only 5% were wholesale. But what about the smaller brands? For contemporary and smaller brands that own fewer or no stores, and thus dependent on department stores to act as their conduit to shoppers, this could be a disaster. According to Joseph Sarachek, a lawyer who has represented about 30 brands that are owed money by Saks, some are owed between $50,000 to $10 million. In bankruptcy, secured creditors are paid before unsecured ones, which essentially means that most deep-pocketed investors in the company are remunerated before the poorest vendors. Those typically get pennies on the dollar, said Doug Hand, an attorney who represents brands like Todd Snyder. Sakin Ahluwalia, who founded the evening wear label Sakin and Babi with his wife Babi Ahluwalia, said that his company hadn't been paid in months by either Saks or Neiman. We're starting off the year on the back foot, he said. It certainly creates a cash flow problem, which combined with the tariffs kind of creates a perfect storm for us. Why is no one speaking about this? Because Saks, Neiman, and Bergdorf are likely going to exist in some form and will still be among the most storied luxury names. Smaller brands will need the exposure they offer. There's nowhere else to sell, Mr. Sarachek said. The Ahluwalias sounded frightened by the prospect of continuing to work with department stores or deciding not to work with department stores because of how necessary they remain to their business. What does it mean for other department stores? Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom, the two other luxury national retailers left standing, are sensing opportunity. Nordstrom has hired a number of Saks and Neiman employees, and Bloomingdale's has been wooing luxury brands like Chanel, Chloe, and Burberry and increasing their floor space. Perhaps the biggest winners will be smaller multi-brand stores that essentially offer the opposite of algorithm-engineered shopping, like Maxfield in Los Angeles, Capital in Charlotte, North Carolina, Icrem in Chicago, and Dover Street Market in New York and Los Angeles. These are boutiques that have become destinations because they are very local, very curated, and reflect the environments around them. They are often run by owners who have personal relationships with their customers and are willing to take a risk on unknown labels, so shoppers never know quite what they are going to find from one visit to the next. Is there an upside? The good news for anyone who noticed the increasingly empty shelves at some Saks and Neiman stores is that they may soon be filled. Many brands stopped shipping new inventory to the stores back in October, November, when it became increasingly clear that Saks Global might declare bankruptcy. In a healthy situation, new inventory flows into the store every week. Shoppers kept seeing a dwindling assortment of the same old stuff. The bankruptcy loan means Saks can start paying vendors again and they can start shipping. Okay, but is it only a matter of time before department stores fully disappear? An understandable question, given that one-story names like Barney's, Bonwit Teller, and Lord & Taylor no longer exist. People still really like to shop in actual stores. However, Marigay McKee, a former president of Saks, called it, quote, an American pastime. Andrew Rosen, the founder of Theory and now an investor and advisor to brands like Alice and Olivia, Veronica Beard, and Rag & Bone, said that as far as he was concerned, nothing could replace the one-stop emporium where customers have access to a wide variety of brands under one roof and see, feel, and touch everything. He at least thinks rumors of the death of the department store are highly exaggerated. But in order to survive, the stores that are left will have to change. How will they change? The United States seems to be heading toward a European model wherein department stores are more like tourist attractions in big urban centers than chains of transaction centers. For example, see Harrods and Selfridges in London, Bon Marché and Printemps in Paris, and Rinascente in Milan. The idea is shopping as entertainment with art exhibitions, limited edition collaborations, and hospitality. Think of them as shopping Disneylands contained in landmark buildings where visitors can experience the elite consumption habits of another time. And you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the January 14th, 2026 issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been me, Dan Arth. Thank you for listening.